Clearly, one of the most common questions that I get as a real estate agent, people relocating to Utah, is, am I going to fit in the Mormon community if I'm not LDS? Hey, I'm Scott Willie. I'm here with my friend Jeff. He's a fellow YouTuber. He has a YouTube channel called 𝐂𝐿 He's explored everything there is to know about the LDS and Mormon faith. So I have him on the channel today. We're going to dive into everything about what it's like living in a high LDS population. So if you're thinking about relocating to Salt Lake City, you definitely want to watch this video. Thank you so much for being here. By the way, I'm going to give a quick intro to the audience. This is what 𝐂𝐻𝐻𝐿 said that you are.
Oh dear.
So I want you to tell me how accurate this is.
What do the robots have to say about it?
It says Jeff McCullough is an evangelical pastor. He started his 𝐂𝐿 YouTube channel, which I'll definitely make sure to pin in the description. It's an awesome YouTube channel. In March 2022 to explore the culture and beliefs of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as LDS Church or Mormonism. We might use all three of those terms today. He describes the channel as being, quote, devoted to fighting criticism with curiosity and inviting dialogue between Christians and Latter-day Saints. He makes clear that he is not trying to convert anyone or attack another faith. Rather, he wants to bridge a conversation between two faith groups in a respectful and dignified way. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, I think it is pretty accurate. I mean, I don't know if it said that in there or not, but I mean, the fact that I have grown up as what they say here in Utah, a never-mo.
I've never heard that term before. What does that mean?
It means never been a Mormon.
Oh.
There's never-mo, there's 𝐂𝐻𝐿, which is an ex-Mormon.
Sounded like a soda drink.
Yeah, like you get at Swig or Fizz, yeah. But yeah, I grew up as a Protestant evangelical. So learning about the LDS Church and also learning about the strained relationship between Protestants and evangelicals.
Yep.
And as a result of that, the lack of dialogue that's not taking place is why I wanted to start the channel.
And that's why I really wanted you to come on here, because so many people who are relocating to Utah, one of the biggest concerns or whatever that's brought up, whether it's valid or not, is like, if we're not Mormon and we're not part of the LDS Church, is it going to be weird? That seems to be oftentimes like one of the number one reasons why people are hesitant to want to pull the trigger and relocate to Salt Lake City. And because you have by far one of the best YouTube channels in the country that deals with this topic, and because you've relocated yourself to Utah and you've really dove into this topic, I think it'd be super helpful for the audience of people interested in living in Salt Lake City to fully understand and to approach it the way you've approached it, because I would argue no one's done it better. So with that, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I got my script in front of me here.
Yeah.
So let's give some context and sort of dive into sort of your beginning and your motivation for wanting to explore this topic in the first place. So my first question is, what initially inspired you to start your YouTube channel, 𝐂𝐿 and explore the Latter-day Saint beliefs back in March of 2022?
Well, it really kind of sparked back in 2020. So we're at the beginning of the pandemic in June. We were 3 months into our 2 weeks of lockdown.
Yeah, it was a long 2 weeks.
It was a long 2 weeks. And we reached a point where the kids were done with school. We had been housebound because of everything. And things opened up around the country for a moment. They thought they could start loosening things up. So travel started to become a little bit easier, at least for a moment.
Right.
And we were like, what can we do to get out of the house to still kind of respect the different, travel restrictions, but to actually travel? And we said, let's go do national parks. So we were going to do Colorado and maybe go down to the Grand Canyon. And my wife had a friend in Sandy, Utah, which is in Salt Lake County. And she said, hey, I've lived in Colorado. I've lived in Utah. Utah is better than Colorado.
It's going to upset some people from Colorado, but I agree with you.
I would agree as well, because I've spent a lot of time in Colorado. Colorado is great. But her whole thing was, if you're going to get out of the house, don't just go down to the Grand Canyon. Like everybody does that. Like come to, go to Mesa Verde, go to Moab, come up to Salt Lake, then you can go to Jackson, Wyoming, which is only 4 hours away. You can go up to Yellowstone. You can go.
So that was the first time you had ever been to Salt Lake?
It was the first time I'd been to Salt Lake. I'd been to Utah before. I'd backpacked 20 plus years ago down in southern Utah. But so when we rolled into town, I'm first of all confused because all the street names are numbers.
Very confusing.
That was honestly my first impression. Like, what in the world? What is the deal with all this? And then I started seeing these white steeples everywhere, and thinking it was just a very churched area. I knew that there was a Latter-day Saint concentration out here, but there's a Catholic concentration in New York. There's a Lutheran concentration in Missouri. So I just didn't think much of it. And then the more we talked to our friends, she was explaining that, this whole place is generationally Latter-day Saint. And as a result, it is culturally Latter-day Saint. Even if you're not a Latter-day Saint, you will be immersed in Latter-day Saint culture as long as you're in Utah.
Right.
So she brought it up in the sense of so since you're a pastor and, she's an evangelical Christian,
right.
She was saying you guys should consider coming out here because it would be there's a very interesting spiritual climate that you guys could enter into.
Totally different.
Very
Coming
different.
From Missouri, right? Specifically, was it St. Louis?
Yeah, I was on the Illinois side of St. Louis, Missouri.
You're right in the Bible Belt.
Yeah.
So to go from that to Salt Lake City. When you first visited Utah, what assumptions did you have, if any, about Latter-day Saints? And how did your interactions either change or be confirmed when you first got here?
I was so unfamiliar with a geographical location in America concentrated by a religious population. That I didn't know that existed.
Yeah.
Like I said, I knew that there was per populace more of one denomination. There's more Baptists in Georgia than there is in Connecticut. So I just thought it was like that. Like I've heard of the LDS church.
Right.
Actually, I hadn't. I'd heard of the Mormon church.
Right.
Because when she told me about the LDS church,
I said,
"What is an LDS?"
Yeah.
I didn't really know their beliefs.
Right.
I got them very confused and mixed up with Jehovah's Witnesses, which is another door-knocking religious group out there. And so those were my general assumptions. I thought that they may or may not practice polygamy. I didn't know.
Okay.
I knew that Mitt
Another
Romney,
big question, by the way.
Another
very common misconception.
Which they don't.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, there
modern
are
day
splinter groups that do, but modern day Latter-day Saints don't. And I knew Mitt Romney was a Latter-day Saint. So that was the extent of what I knew. So when she made this invitation that, you guys should come out here, this would be a really interesting place to do ministry, I was just like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not interested. I'd like to hike. I'd like to go to the mountains. So I didn't think anything of it.
Right.
But the very long and the short of it is, over the next few months, that little invitation kept chirping in my ear. I started doing some research online about even what Latter-day Saints are, the history of Utah. And the more research I did, the more I was finding very adversarial conversations between pastors and Latter-day Saints.
So it came up naturally. It was like just in your everyday conversations. It was like, this is interesting. Like I come from this Christian evangelical, from Missouri, like think about Bible Belt, very traditional Protestant. And then you're introduced to this entirely new belief system, culture, which very, very entwined culturally and within the religious context, right? Of Salt Lake.
And I have a background not only in ministry, but in video production and YouTube. I've worked on other YouTube channels and stuff. So naturally I did, because of my background in YouTube and also because everybody does research on YouTube now. Well, now they do it on ChatGPT, but before they did it on YouTube. And all I was finding were these pastors who would stand outside of temples and Latter-day Saint gatherings and kind of pepper them with questions and try to get into an apologetics debate.
Right.
And I just really felt strongly compelled to say, there seems to be a really important conversation here that isn't taking place because of the approach. So what if I started a YouTube channel where I presented myself as the type of pastor you might run into at Walmart or might want to talk to you in a church foyer if you went into a church, not the ones who are out looking for an apologetics debate. So I started the YouTube channel to fight criticism with curiosity, to have healthy conversations. Obviously, we are both proselytizing organizations. Protestants, evangelicals evangelize, and Latter-day Saints, we all know they go door to door, so they proselytize as well. And as much as that is important to our traditions, what if we were willing to set that compulsion aside to just understand and get to know one another? We know that deep down inside, each one of us are still going to have that in the back of our mind. That goes without saying. But can we have a conversation that goes beyond that? And that's what Hello Saints is. Yeah,
that's a really interesting, because you approach it from such a genuine curiosity without trying to be adversarial. That it's religion is like the one most, you could argue the most adversarial topic there is, because it has such large implications in everyone's mind.
Well, there's two things you don't talk about at the Thanksgiving table with Uncle Bob. Politics and religion.
In my case, it's also who they used as a real estate agent.
Or
all right.
Michigan versus
Sure.
Ohio.
That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
So what have your initial, what were some of those initial misconceptions about Latter-day Saints that have evolved since you started that project on YouTube?
They're oftentimes depicted by Latter-day Saints, by Protestants. Some of this is warranted. I think some of it not quite as warranted. Some of it has become sensationalized. That they are a group of people who are part of the word cult is thrown around.
Yep.
They don't really think on their own. They don't really read the scriptures. They're a little bit strange. And that's typically how people depicted them. But the more I speak with them, they are actually, especially now, because there's a lot of nuance we don't necessarily need to get into about how Latter-day Saints practice belief, and they believe in what's called ongoing revelation. So their beliefs actually morph a little bit more than you might see in a Protestant or Catholic paradigm. And as things stand today, they don't look cultish. I mean, there's a lot of people who might look.
It's crazy how common that word is thrown around, and you only hear that from really people who didn't grow up in Utah. Because if you grow up in Utah and you've been around the Mormon church, it doesn't seem cultish at all. It's just like, oh yeah, it's another religion. Whether you're a part of it or not, it's just like, yeah,
it's another faith group.
It's another faith group.
Now, is there a conversation to be had, which is between, it is had between Protestants and Latter-day Saints as to whether or not Joseph Smith was a prophet and whether he fulfills the criteria of being a cult leader. That is a whole other discussion. But they, to your point, even living in Utah, where it is a very saturated Latter-day Saint culture, and even though the culture is very much impacted by Latter-day Saints, they function and they engage and they appear and they worship in ways that just seem to be another sort of unique faith group. And they are kind. They actually, many of them do read their scriptures. They
amazing neighbors, by the way.
Unbelievable neighbors.
They're like the best neighbors you could ask for.
Some of the most high-performing entrepreneurs and professionals that you'll ever meet.
Politicians, athletes.
They're very kind and normal people, and I almost feel strange saying that because it feels patronizing. Like, oh, well, they actually are normal. But to answer your question, to dispel those stereotypes that stem from South Park and the Broadway musical, it has been very much different. And truly now 2.5 years living in Utah, some of my best friends are Latter-day Saints.
Right.
So
essentially, my goal with this is to ask all the questions to someone like you who, for not technically being a Mormon, you're more knowledgeable about the LDS faith and honestly, certainly any non-LDS member, but even a lot of probably current ones because you've studied it to such degree. Not to say that they don't, but just the fact that that's been like your entire working career, over the last few years to study this in such depth. There we go. So my goal is to ask you all the questions that people who are not from Utah would likely want to ask. So one of those being, what topics have been the most challenging or surprising for you to explore? Now that you're a few years into it, I'm sure there's been things that have come up that you're like, I didn't even know this was a thing, or that this was a potential challenge or a difference between the two churches.
That could be answered in 3 different ways: historically, doctrinally, and culturally. Historically, you're gonna find all kinds of things that are very surprising about when Latter-day Saints came to Utah, why they came, how they came, who brought them here with Brigham Young. There's a lot of controversy surrounding some of that. So some of that sounds very pioneer, and pioneer culture is very important to Latter-day Saints. But some of it is also a bit controversial because people were coloring outside of ethical and civic lines during the day. So there's those undertones here that were surprising, many of which are tied to Brigham Young. Doctrinally, that is very subjective. It depends on what religious paradigm you come from, because something that might seem strange to a Catholic might not seem quite as strange from an evangelical.
Right.
There are any number of things that make you kind of scratch your head doctrinally. I think the one that's most tangible and easiest to point to is their temple activity.
Okay.
Latter-day Saints have two types of buildings that they worship in, and you'll see them all over Utah.
Okay.
One is your typical church building. They sometimes call it a chapel or a meeting house or a ward house. This is where they go every Sunday morning. They have a normal church service that they call a sacrament meeting,
Right.
where they have Sunday school and kids church and all that other stuff, which they call primary. So you have those buildings, which are going to be peppered all throughout every neighborhood.
Okay.
In Utah.
Which, by the way, this is incredibly helpful for anyone who's like wanting to explore Utah or coming to visit, and they just see churches galore everywhere. But it's not necessarily the same thing as like going to Alabama
Right.
or Missouri and you drive around, you see churches everywhere. So it's actually very helpful to explain this so that people have a better understanding when they are driving around of like,
Right.
what are these different buildings? How does this work?
Right. And they're geographically placed so that where you live as a Latter-day Saint, you are told which building to attend and at what time.
So on Sunday morning, practically what that looks like is like literally all of your neighbors are walking to church,
Yes.
right? Assuming it's not in the middle of winter.
That's right.
Yeah.
And their church services, they're called sacrament meetings. They don't have pastors. There are no sermons.
Okay.
But they take what we would call communion, and then they have members from the church, one or two or three of them speak.
I didn't know
on
that.
on a
I
topic.
did not know that they
Yeah.
didn't do sermons.
There's no teaching during sacrament meeting beyond people
Oh.
just sharing a topic that they were assigned by the bishop to share. Now
Interesting.
there will be teaching in what they call second hour, which is where men get together called elders quorum, and they might receive teaching, and women get together called relief society. They might receive some teaching.
Yeah.
But most of what they do during their church service is the sacrament and hearing 10-minute talks from church
Second
members.
hour is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
That immediately makes me think of like second lunch from Lord of the Rings when
Yeah.
they were like the first movie. Like, when's second breakfast?
Right. So then, aside from those very modest, traditional-looking churches you see all
Yeah.
throughout the valley, they have temples. Temples
Okay.
are giant, ornate, white, lit-up buildings
Yeah.
where they spare no penny. I mean, they put everything into it, and they usually
Those are the big boys.
those are the big boys. They have
Yep.
a gold angel on top blowing the trumpet.
Okay.
This is where
Is it actual gold, by the way?
I believe it is.
Holy
Yeah.
cow. Okay. That's
Yeah.
cool.
And in these temples is where they do some of the most unique rituals and practices tied to the Latter-day Saint faith.
Okay.
And this is to answer your question. Some of the more shocking, I didn't realize is
Right.
most of what they do in the temples is for those who have already passed away. It's for the dead.
Right.
They do baptisms for the dead. They have something called confirmation, an initiatory, an endowment ceremony.
So it seems like it's a lot more formal activities happening in those, right? And those
Very
are
formal.
there's way less of those.
There are
To
less
state
of
the
those.
obvious.
Yes, there are a lot in Utah.
Yeah.
But it's a big deal when a city outside of Utah gets a temple. Because
Really?
for church members who live in St. Louis, for example, they would have to, previous to that, go up to Chicago if they wanted to go do temple
Oh.
work.
So how many are there outside of Utah?
Well, there's approximately 17 million Latter-day Saints worldwide.
Okay.
And I think only about 5 to 6, and I could be wrong on that, million live in the Intermountain West. So that would be Utah,
Sure.
Idaho, northern Arizona area.
Right.
So they're scattered throughout the world. And
But like how many of those larger buildings exist outside?
I want to say there's a couple. There's a couple hundred total
Oh.
in the world,
Okay.
and
Wow.
and I would say a couple dozen, dozen and a half, a couple dozen are in Utah
Yeah.
or this area. So
Got it. Okay.
my numbers are probably a little bit off there, but that's approximate.
Close enough.
But that was surprising for me to learn. Oh, this is where they go on Sundays, but on all the other days of the week, many of them go into these temples to do ordinances and ceremonies. They have something called a sealing ceremony. That's where their weddings take place. It's very, very
Okay.
formal and very unique to their faith and practice. So
Got
that
it.
was probably one of the more interesting things that I learned about them. So that's history, that's doctrine, and then when it comes to cultural, I mean, we could talk about this all day long.
Mhm.
The Latter-day Saint culture is everywhere here.
Mhm.
A lot of things are closed on Sunday because Latter-day Saints observe the Sabbath and they don't go out on Sundays.
Sure.
You're not going to have quite as many bars and coffee shops. They're definitely here, but not compared to what I had out in St. Louis or where my wife is from in New York, where you
Yeah.
could throw a baseball in any direction and hit a tavern.
A great example of that when I first moved to Utah, one of the first questions that I asked, or that a lot of people ask when they move here, is like, how do you know if an area has a larger percentage of Mormons versus non-Mormons? Like, how would you know? And one time someone told me, and I don't know if there's validity to this or not, but they're like, well, if there's the closer you live to a liquor store, the less, because it's like Utah County, there's way less liquor stores than up in Salt Lake County where you're closer to downtown.
Yeah, or even Davis County.
Sure.
I would be surprised if one is even in Davis County, which is directly north of Salt Lake.
Just north of Salt Lake, yeah.
Same with Tooele County, which is directly west.
Yeah.
But I know that we're probably going to have other conversations specifically on culture, but Latter-day Saints, on one hand, are a very tight-knit community.
Mm-hmm.
They are generally pretty open. I think that's something that's new within the past 10 to 20 years. I think prior to that, if you moved to Utah in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, you might have been shunned as a non-Latter-day Saint. That has changed, unless I've heard you're in sort of more rural areas.
Okay.
So we're talking way far away from the Salt Lake area.
Okay.
But they have been the greatest neighbors.
So that's been your experience then, as a
unbelievable neighbors.
non-LDS member moving to Utah.
Unbelievable. They're kind. They're genuine. They're interested in how you're genuinely interested. They'll invite you to church, but they don't make you feel weird if you don't go. They bring you cookies and food if you're
I'll take
sick.
that all day.
They are literally.
I'll just pretend to be sick so they can.
They're some of the best neighbors
cookies.
that you could have, and even with my kids, with friends. Again, I was told before we moved here, your kids and your wife are going to be very lonely because Latter-day Saints won't associate with them. I think that's antiquated information.
That's a great misconception that you hear all the time. Is like, well, I'm concerned that my kids are going to be influenced in their everyday activities in the school, and they're going to be ostracized from certain activities. Is there any truth to that?
We have not experienced that. Now, we are in Salt Lake County. Mm-hmm. It is the most diverse county in the state.
Sure.
So, honestly, my kids have had a harder time when it comes to dealing with kids who are unchurched in general, like kids who might have grown up atheists.
Secular.
They might have looser morals or values. That has been much more of a challenge than with Latter-day Saints. In fact, this is just for me, but if my son comes home and he says, hey, I want to go to Parker's house, and I'm like, who's Parker? It's like, well, he lives a couple streets over. One of the first questions I ask is he a Latter-day Saint? And if he says yes, I'm like, that's totally
go
cool.
for it. Go for it. You're totally safe.
Be in touch. I'd like to meet the parent at some point. If they say no, it's not a Latter-day Saint, or somebody who's unchurched, I'm like, well, I'd like to get to know them a little bit more because
if anything, there's
wide
more.
open there.
Yeah, sure. And that's the same pushback that when I hear people say they give that same sort of concern or excuse of like, well, I don't want my kids to be influenced by that, or I'm afraid they're going to be ostracized, or I don't know if we're going to fit in, and we're not going to feel like we're part of the community. Well, I would make the argument like, well, if you move to New York, there's a very large Muslim population.
Right.
How come I don't hear you concerned about that? Or if you move to, California, where it can be very secular and very even like sexualized and things like that, like, why is that not brought up to the same degree of concern of moving to?
And I'm sure the religious component, what we were talking about earlier, has something to do with it. You don't have anywhere else in America where there is such an immersive bubble of one religious group like you have here in Utah. But my experience has been they don't pressure you. They don't make you feel weird or strange or odd if you're not in alignment with them. They're generally speaking kind, patient, open-minded people.
That's awesome. So let me ask this question. We kind of talked about like what are some of the misconceptions that either you specifically or Protestants have in general about LDS. What about the other way around? Are there misconceptions that people had about you that now, once they got to know you and you build trust with them and you had genuine curiosity, were there any misconceptions the other direction?
Yeah, and they're actually misconceptions I have to deal with on a regular basis on the channel, and they always believe that I'm here for the takedown.
Oh.
They think that if you're if you're a Protestant in a Latter-day Saint world and you engage with them, there's a high likelihood that there might be some hostility. Or
maybe from past experiences, because that's
probably, yeah. I mean, historically, going all the way back to Missouri in the 1830s, Protestants and Latter-day Saints have had a very tumultuous history.
It's a good word.
And they are a lot of Latter-day Saints hold that in them culturally. So they're initially kind of guarded, and then when they realize, hey, I'm not here to go for the takedown.
Sure.
I'm not looking for a mic drop. We can have conversations. My YouTube channel is really all about that. They almost do the opposite of become guarded, and they are like, "Oh, I want to be your friend.
Yeah.
Like, I want to talk. Let's hang out. They really desire someone who will engage them with respect,
Okay.
and authentic relationship."
So for maybe audience members that aren't, if you're watching this video and you're not LDS, what's the best way for someone to approach that topic with a member who is?
Latter-day Saints are incredibly comfortable talking about faith. And the reason for that is because most of them served 18 to 24 months on what they call a mission, between the ages of 18 and I want to say like 22 or something like that.
Sure. That's why you have 24-year-old college football players at BYU.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they're pretty good.
Yeah. Got a couple extra years of growth in them.
They do. It's also why you have the what they call the elders walking around with their white shirts and tie and the name tags knocking on the door. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
They're used to having doors closed in their face. They're used to having their faith ridiculed or challenged. So generally speaking, once they know that there's a productive opportunity for conversation, they're going to be willing to go there.
Right.
Now, each individual is going to be different, so I'm not speaking for everybody. That's just been my experience. Some of them might kick into a proselytizing mode, and they might be trying to get you to agree with them on certain things. But
Muscle memory kicks in.
Yeah, not in a high-pressure way. Others are just like, hey, I respect what you believe.
Sure.
I don't need to change what you believe. One thing that they'll say, this comes from one of their past presidents, is I don't need to change what you believe, but if there's any way I can add to it, I'm willing to have that conversation.
Interesting.
But typically speaking, Latter-day Saints are pretty natural when it comes to discussing issues of faith.
Yeah. So you mentioned this idea of like a Utah bubble, which is a really, really common phrase around here. So what does the so-called Utah bubble feel like to you? Like, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Does that bubble even actually exist?
It 100% exists.
Okay. For anyone unfamiliar, like, what does that mean?
You'll hear people talk about being a Latter-day Saint by faith, and those who are Latter-day Saint by culture. And there's going to be naturally any overlap with any group there. But in Utah, there are so many cultural idiosyncrasies that have been baked in generation after generation, passed down from one person with priesthood authority to the next, or one ward to the next, that that make it feel in a way a bit insular. So you can tell that they have focused much of their time, attention, and energy, even faith-wise, only on what they believe and only on how they practice it. So this is a little a harsh term, but I'll even the scale in just a second.
Okay.
But there's almost like a shelteredness in Utah when it comes to more diversity of when it comes to Latter-day Saints in Utah.
Sure.
When it comes to like just different cultures and.
Do you think that's because like there isn't a ton of necessarily diversity in general? Like we have a super high population of white Caucasian, very few, diverse.
I think it comes down to like lifestyle.
Okay.
Lifestyle issues and like faith concepts are usually very limited.
Okay.
Some of them are when it comes to ethnic diversity, they actually do have some comfortableness there because some of them have served on missions in Japan or South America or Europe. So
you'd be shocked how many are bilingual.
Exactly.
They served in another country and they like had to learn that language.
But you can tell, even like going on a Sunday morning, everybody walking around in their white shirts and ties and their dresses. If you do go to a Latter-day Saint church service, just the vibe, the kids, the language that is used. I've gone to a sacrament meeting outside of Utah. You don't see the white shirts and ties as much.
Right.
There's a lot more cultural diversity.
Interesting.
It doesn't feel quite.
Is it because this is
uptight.
like, not to use a pun, but this is like Mecca?
Yeah, for sure.
Literally, LDS church, like the first church was established.
Yeah.
Downtown or temple or.
And so what I would say to that is, I think that's unavoidable.
Right.
For a group that has been so concentrated in one area for so long. In the same way, here's me balancing the scales. In my part of the country, where I grew up in Southern Illinois, right next to St. Louis, more Bible Belt. Or if we go to Alabama or Georgia or Mississippi or Louisiana, there are a lot of evangelicals, a lot of Baptists, and they probably similarly might have a more what you could call sheltered or limited view of other faith concepts or cultures and things of that nature. So to me, it's more of a natural byproduct as more than anything else than like any weirdity that, we can slap on Latter-day Saints per se.
And correct me if I'm wrong, because neither of us grew up in Utah, but I feel like the last few years, especially since COVID, the amount of other people relocating to Utah or non-LDS members moving to Utah has probably gone up significantly, because as you said, there's also this like geographical bubble. If you think about it, outside of Salt Lake City, like we're kind of in the high desert technically. I mean, it's a several hour drive to like Vegas, even to like St. George in southern Utah, or to like Denver, like the next major market if you're going east, several hour drive to the Pacific Northwest or to California. So it's also kind of geographically in this weird bubble, isolated to a degree. And so it makes sense that it's like this church was established here. Not a lot of people moved here until some big, seismic shift like a COVID, where then people started looking at, wow, what is this like? What is this hidden gem that's super conservative and is West Coast without the typical like West Coast beliefs?
I've been told this multiple times by Latter-day Saints and non-Latter-day Saints in Utah, that the moment things started to shift, where Latter-day Saints went from being like, it's us versus them, we're going to look down on you, we're going to shun you if you're not part of the church here in Utah, was the 2002 Winter Olympics.
Interesting.
Once there was an influx of money, opportunity, and even, the cultures blending together there, that kind of cracked the bubble a little bit. And more people discovered Utah and started moving here. Businesses started to notice it a little bit more. So there's been an increasing business boom here in Utah. But I have also heard that COVID, with the housing market, the way it just went bonkers, you had people leaving California because of taxes and home prices coming to Utah and Idaho and places like that. So
riots.
That too. There have been all kinds of reasons why people have descended here in, I guess ascended in the high desert in Salt Lake. But 2002 Olympics and COVID have made a big difference in kind of
arguably the two biggest like seismic shifts that caused inward migration.
Yeah.
Let's talk about community and culture a little bit, and then kind of how that relates a little bit to real estate. How would you describe the sense of community that both you and your wife Joy and your kids, just as a family, that you've experienced among Latter-day Saints?
They're very welcoming. They're very inviting. They're always, at least where we have been, have been very good about including us and making sure that we are welcome here. I have friends in Tooele County, which is one county over, that had the opposite experience, where they felt they were excluded and they weren't really invited into community. So I think it might depend on where you live in the state. But in Salt Lake County, we've been able to find good community. Some of my closest friends are Latter-day Saints. And even, and this is interesting if you're a person of faith, there is a lot of openness to other faith groups being present here. So there are Latter-day Saints who love that there are Protestant evangelicals here and moving here. And they honor other faith groups. They have a calling within the church that actually goes out and tries to build community connections between different faith groups. So we've found a great deal of ease when it comes to community. Now, there's always going to be things that we just won't resonate with, which will make it challenging.
Are you open to sharing what some of those things are?
Well, I think that there are certain assumptions that might be made about what we're comfortable with and how we live our lives and some of those things that might be surprising to them, and it goes beyond, whether or not I drink coffee or whether or not I drink alcohol. But in a sense, Latter-day Saints in Utah and in Salt Lake are almost more open to community and connection than other faith groups are to them. which
Yeah, totally.
it causes this very strange dynamic. They might experience a little bit more of a frosty posture
Sure.
from a Protestant evangelical church when they like show up on the playground with their ball. They're like, let's play.
Yeah.
And a lot of the other faith groups are like, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
Like that can be a little bit of an awkward dynamic.
Okay.
So if you're up for community,
Right.
I think there's opportunity. But sometimes, some awkward dynamics slip in there.
Yeah. You kind of moved here with the idea of diving into it and exploring it, but maybe, from your perspective, how might perceptions of LDS culture influence someone's decision to move here in the first place?
That's huge. I mean, honestly, that could almost be at the beginning of this video because that is probably the most personal aspect of my experience here in Utah. This intrigue with this people group and this region was something that preceded our move here by about 3.5 years. And whenever I would talk to people in Utah, different pastors, ministry leaders, or friends, they would say, like, if you have any thought of moving here, like, you need to come in eyes wide open. It is a different place to live. It is almost like moving to another country, more than any other place in America. So I had the benefit of having a lot of people tell me that
ahead of time, prepping you.
And as a result, we would visit here quite a bit, even while
Right.
we were like halfway considering maybe we'll move here, maybe we won't.
Right.
Visiting here probably 10 to 12 times before we moved here was really helpful for us over the course of a 3 or 4 year period.
Interesting.
Because if you blindly just buy a house and show up here and expect it to be
a little bit more of like shell shock,
it is going to be culture shock.
So then let me ask you a controversial question, and your response is your personal opinion, not necessarily the opinion of every non-LDS member in Utah. But do you think that there's like a need for more cultural or religious diversity in Utah, or do you think it's like it's okay where it's at, or it's gone too far? Like, what's your
I
stance on
personally
that?
am of the opinion that there's no such, like, it's never a bad thing. There's no such thing as too much culture.
Okay.
I'm a big melting pot fan. I think
Okay.
that's there's something about I heard George W. Bush say this one time about immigration, that the immigrant experience activates something in Americans where we come alive and we pay attention, because that is all of our story.
Sure.
All of us have a story tied to immigration and some of those things. So I know that you're not necessarily asking about immigration, but just diversity. I would love it if there was more diversity in Utah. I come from St. Louis, which is very diverse. It's very culturally diverse.
Right.
And I miss that here in Utah. That answers probably a few questions you asked that I didn't answer directly.
Yeah.
If there's one thing that has been difficult, other than the drivers, but has been one of the hardest things to overcome, I miss the diversity that I had in St. Louis.
That's interesting. And drop a comment below if you currently live in Utah. Is Utah too diverse already? Does it need more diversity? Do you agree with Jeff, or do you completely disagree with him? I'd be curious to know. So drop your thoughts in the comments. Let me kind of end this with asking some more practical advice of what you would tell people who are thinking about moving here. How would you advise someone who's relocating to Utah and feels that the doctrinal differences between Latter-day Saints seem very different or even unusual in their opinion? Like, what can they do to build genuine friendships while still, respecting local beliefs?
I think doctrine plays as big of a role as you make it play. I don't think, again, unless you might be in more rural areas or very far away from the Salt Lake region, I don't think you're going to encounter too many Latter-day Saints that are going to, in some way, twist your arm into factoring in doctrine into whether you have community or relationship with people. So it can be a non-issue if you choose for it to be a non-issue. I don't know what your experience was like moving here, because you've lived so many different places, but I know plenty of people who have moved here that just they themselves have just not factored in the Latter-day Saint beliefs into their experience, so it's just kind of a non-issue. That doesn't mean that there aren't Latter-day Saint cultural things that they have to contend with, but the doctrinal things don't. They play as big of a role as you allow them to play.
Yeah, I would make the argument it's only an issue if you make it an issue. Like,
Right.
we haven't had any, any like pointed problems that would prevent us from making a different decision had we to do it all over again. So,
Latter-day Saints are not hostile.
yeah.
If you move into a neighborhood and you're one of just a few families here in the Salt Lake area that aren't a Latter-day Saint, they're not going to be contentious or hostile or adversarial in any way.
Awesome. How would you explain to non-LDS families what the day-to-day life feels like in a place where many of your local interactions are going to be with people of the LDS faith?
Latter-day Saints live like everybody else do. I mean, they go to work, they have dreams, and they have visions for what they're involved in, and they are very, very family-oriented, very family-centric, something that we probably haven't stated enough, and even in this video.
True.
They build much of what they do around family activities and school and sports.
So what are maybe some practical things that you would advise someone like, hey, if you're new to Utah or thinking about, or once you do move here, what's some like practical things that people can do to bridge that gap?
If you have kids, get them involved in sports. You're not going to get it automatically through the school system like you do in other parts of the country.
Really?
Yeah, you have to get them involved in rec or club sports.
Okay.
So like my son's middle school doesn't have any sports, and there's like a couple thousand kids there.
Wow.
So you have to go out and but getting them involved helps them kind of make connections and relationships and friends.
Okay.
I think just being open to, there's one of the things that my wife likes to do, she just likes to explore. Like, it's almost like finding the hidden diamond in the rough type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Being that there isn't a cool restaurant on every corner, like go out and find the cool restaurants. Like, it actually makes it kind of fun because they're there, especially in the Salt Lake region.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of amazing places to grab a drink or grab dinner or grab dessert. So I think you can make it your own once you're out here. But yeah, practically speaking, just be open and willing to explore and to kind of find your own place and be ready for tons of opportunities for families to do things. There's so many family friendly activities, restaurants, bowling alleys, movie theaters, malls, all the places that are dying everywhere else in America are thriving here in Utah.
Totally.
I was at a mall on a Sunday.
Mall?
A mall.
Is that right?
It's
Is
a
it
place
pronounced
where
mall?
there's a bunch of stores there and restaurants.
Interesting.
A mall on a Sunday at 3 p.m. No Latter-day Saints there because it's the Sabbath.
Sure.
And there were lines out of the doors of almost every store. It felt like Black Friday.
Interesting.
And that's not uncommon. So practically speaking, look forward to opportunities to have.
That's so true.
So
now
much
that I think
to do.
about it, like movie theaters.
Yeah, they're
packed.
like
they're thriving here.
Yeah.
And the rest of the country, it's like they're all closing down.
Yeah. So
that's so true.
Practically look for all of the things where you can just be active, whether as a family or not to mention all the outdoor stuff, the skiing, the hiking. Like you will never have a shortage of things to do or to be involved with.
So I'm going to ask you one last question, but I'm going to ask it in the negative, which is who should not move to Salt Lake City?
If you're looking for a super diverse, urban, like ultra urban environment, I don't think Utah is going to be for you. You might find a little pocket of that in and around Salt Lake City and Sugar House and places like that.
Which is still a very small city compared to most.
Tiny.
Yeah.
But compared to Chicago, which is St. Louis, New York, those are cities that I'm familiar with, where there's so much diversity and so many just opportunities for even just urban lifestyle. You just don't have that as much around here. Here it's about suburbia, family life, and outdoorsy hiking, skiing.
Lots of minivans.
Culture, yeah.
Tons of minivans.
There's a lot of minivans, a lot of Tahoes,
Yeah, awesome. Sweet. Well, thank you for your insights. Like I said, I don't think anyone knows the LDS belief system better than you, who's not an official member. So super interesting perspective, especially as someone who didn't necessarily grow up in Utah. Like a lot of people watching this channel that are thinking about relocating. So really good practical advice. Hello Saints is the name of the YouTube channel. I'll definitely make sure to pin that. You should go check that out. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott.